Hi guys, it's me, Chazza HD, and welcome to this podcast episode reviewing the Miami Grand Prix that took place yesterday. Of course, I did not do a race watch along for the Miami Grand Prix. In hindsight, yeah, probably should have done one because the race was a lot more exciting than I expected, but I still needed that rest, again, as I explained, because of the important uni work I've got coming up this week. But yeah, it was a good race. It wasn't a classic, but we had some good, really good battling, and it was outside of the two McLarens after they passed Max Verstappen. It was quite close, the rest of the top 10. So yeah, it was a good race, no doubt about it. And of course, the Miami Grand Prix is the first race where I did not do a watch along. So obviously I did a watch along for qualifying, but I missed one for the race. So yeah, let's get into my, thoughts as to just how things played out. Actually, before we do, of course, I've just forgot, we need to get into the results of the Miami Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri wins yet again. Wasn't the easiest drive. Of course, he started from fourth on the grid. But yeah, he fully deserved to win that Grand Prix. Lando Norris in second, and then George Russell third. Bit lucky Russell to finish in third, but just look at the gap between the McLaren and the rest. It is absolutely incredible. And if anyone out there still legitimately thinks McLaren don't have the best car, you are high as a kite, because yesterday's Grand Prix absolutely proved McLaren are so far ahead of the others, at least in a race situation, and still I think in a qualifying situation, I still think they are comfortably ahead of the rest. The race, they're just better in race situations than they are in qualifying, and that's why they were even stronger compared to their low fuel pace from the rest of the weekend. Max Verstappen fourth, obviously started on pole, ended up having a disappointing race. P5, Alexander Albon for Williams. One of the best drives of Albon's career, as far as I'm concerned. Yes, Williams were quick, but he absolutely delivered in that Grand Prix. A brilliant, brilliant drive from Albon. Kimi Antonelli in sixth. Bit disappointing from him. We'll get on to, of course, more so how his race played out. And then the two Ferraris, 7th and 8th. Charles Leclerc finishing ahead of Lewis Hamilton, as you can see, pretty much around about a minute off the race winner. And it would have been more if there wasn't, virtual safety car periods that we had during the Grand Prix. Probably, Leclerc would have been actually a minute off, and Hamilton even further. It is just incredible the direction Ferrari heading in. They are literally getting worse. They were so bad in this Miami Grand Prix. And legitimately, Williams were quicker than them. Not just in the race, but in qualifying as well. So, yeah, Ferrari going backwards. And then, Hamilton 8th, only just fending off Carlos Sainz in 9th, who did try to finish in 8th at the very last corner. Went for a dive bomb that was very aggressive, but it did not pay off. And then Yuki Tsunoda just about by, I think, less than 0.2 of a second, finishing 10th. That was because he had a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. That's why it was so close with him. And Isaac Hadjar, who finished in 11th place. So that is your race results for the Miami Grand Prix. Let's get on to how that affects the championship standings going into now the European season that of course begins in a couple weeks. Oscar Piastri still obviously leads on the championship, 16 points clear of Lando Norris. Max Verstappen in third, now a bit distant in the championship fight. He is now 33 points behind, I believe. Is he 33 points behind? Yeah. Oh no, 32 points, behind. Not 33. But still, that gap is growing. George Russell has closed the gap a bit to Max Verstappen. Russell also losing touch with the McLarens, but he's still, within distance if Mercedes do improve that car with upgrades coming at Imola. And then Charles Leclerc 5th, Antonelli 6th, Hamilton 7th, Alex Albon in 8th, Ocon in 9th, and Lance Stroll still somehow 10th in the championship, despite Aston Martin being basically the slowest team right now. And then on the constructors' side, McLaren are now over 100 points clear of Mercedes in second. I think we can safely say the Constructors' Championship is over. McLaren are going to win it for the second year in a row. Mercedes, comfortably though, in second place. They'll be happy with that, given obviously how they were doing this time last year. Red Bull third, 11 points clear of Ferrari in fourth. Williams in fifth, and comfortably clear of the midfield pack. 17 points clear of Haas, and then a further 6 points to Aston Martin. Racing Bulls in 8th, Alpine in 9th, a point clear of Sauber, who are now last, absolutely, in the championship. Even though, pace-wise, I thought Sauber were decent in Miami. Anyway, one final thing we will touch on, which does obviously give us a good indication as to just how things played out the way they did. Let's go through the race pace data from this Miami Grand Prix. Now, McLaren obviously were the quickest, and as you can see, they were half a second per lap quicker than Red Bull and 0.6 of a second quicker than Mercedes. That, though, is for the whole race. Once Piastri got past Verstappen, the pace difference between the McLaren and the Red Bull was actually quite a bit bigger from that moment until the end of the race. But again, this is for the whole race, which includes when Piastri and also when Lando Norris was behind Max Verstappen. So McLaren, still massively clear, but again, just want to add that context in as to why it wasn't an even bigger gap for the whole race, because again, Max Verstappen was leading for the first, I think, was it 12, 13 laps, something like that. And then, Red Bull half a second off. Mercedes, I think their race pace was, compared to everybody else, it was good, but they were just miles off McLaren. Something I wouldn't say I wasn't expecting. I thought they would be slower than McLaren in the race, but I didn't think it would be as big of a gap, if I'm being honest. And then Williams, legitimately the fourth quickest team in the race, and not just the fourth quickest, they were nearly 0.2 of a second per lap quicker than Ferrari. I just cannot explain how that's happened, especially when Williams came out a couple weeks ago, I think it was, and said they were no longer developing this year's car. Don't know how true that is, but if that is true, then that is just mad. I know no one's really brought that many upgrades so far, but still, to be truly mixing it on pace with Red Bull and Mercedes and be quicker than Ferrari at the 6th Grand Prix of the season is special from them. And then, Ferrari were pretty much a second a lap off the pace of McLaren. Incredibly disappointing. I mean, if you look at their pace compared to McLaren at the Miami Grand Prix from last year, McLaren were still, I think, faster in clear air, but it was only maybe 2 to 3 tenths of a second at most. So, Ferrari just massively compared to last year going backwards. And obviously McLaren getting stronger. Racing Bulls were only, 0.1 or so per lap slower than Ferrari. So Ferrari were literally a midfield team in the Miami Grand Prix. And then Haas, not too bad with their pace. Then a bit of a drop-off then to Sauber, Alpine, and then Aston Martin, the slowest team in the Miami Grand Prix. When 2 years ago, at this race in 2023, they had the second best car on the grid. That's how quickly things change around in Formula One. But there you go. That is what the race pace was like in the Miami Grand Prix. And let's start off, of course, with the race winners, McLaren. Oscar Piastri, brilliant drive. And he really showed in that race why he is more so my favourite to win the championship out of any of the McLaren drivers. Because if you watch his battle with Max Verstappen, he was very smart, was Piastri. He kept deliberately forcing Max to go off the racing line to defend his position. And Oscar knew, like I think we all knew whilst watching it, that Max was not going to be able to do this forever and for the whole race. And eventually you actually saw when Max was battling Lando, eventually Max just gave up and let Lando through because he just knew that it was pointless, defending the position so much because he was losing so much time doing it. And Oscar, just kept forcing him offline, forcing him to be late on the brakes on the dirtier side of the track, and eventually it paid off into turn one. Max, as he always does, he will always force his car up the inside and will always, do that no matter who he's battling. Oscar let him do that and then swooped underneath and took the position. It was a really great battle and it was a very good executed move by Piastri. And again, he was very calm, knew exactly what he was doing and knew that eventually Max was going to go too deep or was going to just absolutely cook his tyres to the point where Max would not be able to keep Oscar behind no matter how well Max can defend or how aggressively Max can defend. And then, if you look at what Lando Norris did against Verstappen, again, you can see the real difference in quality of racecraft. Lando, first time around, tried to go round the outside of Max at turn one. Max rightly squeezed him out. Lando, of course, didn't like that, but it was all well and fair. Lando was just not aggressive enough for those few laps. And then once he did eventually get past, also we have to remember Lando did force Max off the track in trying to overtake him and then had to let him back through, which wasted him a lot of time. Once he did get through, he was 9 seconds behind his teammate. And even though he caught a lot of that gap up, it was too late. So for Lando Norris, that was really where he, I wouldn't say lost the Grand Prix. We'll get on to the start of the race in a moment. But that really did not help. But again, from Oscar Piastri's point of view, that is what won him that race, was his brilliant racecraft against Verstappen. If he had done what Lando was doing, it would have been a very close race between Piastri and Norris, because I'm not sure Oscar was necessarily the quicker driver in the race. Even though I think Oscar was managing quite a lot once Lando got past Max, Lando was probably quicker in that race in clear air compared to Oscar. So Oscar had to do what he did, and then thankfully Lando, not as good in racecraft as Oscar, wasted a few laps behind Max, and then that was really what allowed Oscar to run off into the distance and win the Grand Prix. And again, those differences in racecraft, which are not massive, but big enough to allow Oscar to get the win and Lando to finish where he did, those are the types of things that make the difference over the course of a season and allow you to win a world championship. And you have to say right now, Oscar Piastri is in a very strong position to win this year's championship. And I will make a claim in a moment with Piastri that may surprise some people. With Lando Norris, though, I do feel a bit sorry for him, even though, yes, his racecraft against Max, when he tried and eventually did overtake him, was not that good. At the start, he absolutely was pushed off the track. And I know, technically, Max was ahead at the apex at turn 2, but that rule is absolute bullshit. Just because you're slightly ahead of the apex does not mean you should be allowed to just wander across and push another driver off the circuit. That rule should be abolished. The rule should be, if you have, say, 75% or more of your car alongside, then you are entitled to racing room. Lando had like 95% of his car alongside, and then Max violently came across and forced Lando off the track. Max, for me, should have got a penalty for that. He didn't. I mean, it didn't really affect things in the end in terms of, Max. It's not like Max went on to win because of that. Max, finished in 4th, and it didn't really affect his race in the end. But it affected Lando's race. He ended up dropping down to, 6th place. When if Lando had not gone off the track and had remained in 2nd place, Lando probably wins that Grand Prix. So, yeah, that really, I do feel sorry for Lando in that aspect because that was unfortunate, just the way that all happened. But again, he could have done better passing Max later on. Eventually got past, showed some good pace, but second place it is for Lando. Also, one more thing. Please, anyone out there who still thinks McLaren don't have the best car, please stop from now on, please. Because this race clearly proved that you are wrong if you still believe that Red Bull have a car that's as good as McLaren. And I know, yeah, Max Verstappen got pole, but that was really because of Max Verstappen. That was not because the Red Bull car is on the same level as the McLaren. It just isn't. And that race proved that it is nowhere near the McLaren. And Red Bull are very lucky to have quite possibly one of, if not maybe, by the time it's all said and done, the greatest driver of all time in their car. If they didn't have that in their car and in their team, they wouldn't be in anywhere near close to even be fighting for pole. So, yeah, McLaren, easily the quickest car. I saw as well some comments by Andrea Stella talking after, I think, qualifying about how our Red Bull are good at creating this narrative that we're so quick. You are so quick. The race proved it. And even, I think there was even a stupid comment from Zach Brown that they didn't win the race because they had the best car. It was because they performed so well, the drivers. Again, absolute bullshit. You've got the best car. Just own it. The reason they won't is because when they don't get pole and when they don't win a race, obviously it looks bad. And they don't want to look bad. So, yeah. Bit of insecurity on McLaren's half. They just need to own that they've got the best car. We all know it. So just own it. Yeah, but what do you call it? With Oscar Piastri, before I move on to the next team being... I'll probably move on to Red Bull next. With Oscar Piastri, yeah, now has 4 wins for the season, 4 wins in the first 6 races. That is very dominant. That's almost Sebastian Vettel in 2011-esque type of domination. I think Vettel in 2011 won 5 of the first 6 races. Yeah, Piastri is dominating this season. You cannot deny that. If Oscar Piastri, though, if he wins all 3 of these next 3 races, this next triple header coming up of Imola, Monaco and Barcelona, if he wins all 3 of those races, then for me, Oscar Piastri 100%, no matter what Red Bull do with their car or what Mercedes do, if Oscar wins these next 3 races, Oscar Piastri will be world champion for 2025. No doubt in my mind. Even if Lando finishes second in all 3 of those races, and the gap is still only maybe 30 points or so, Piastri, as long as he gets those wins in Imola, Monaco and Spain, Piastri, for me, absolutely wins the championship. So, we will see whether Oscar can keep this up. If he can, then like I said, I think the championship will be wrapped up by the time we get to the end of the Spanish Grand Prix, which is in about a month's time. But we'll see if he can do so. It's going to be hard to do so because obviously 3 tough racetracks. Lando is still going to be fast. And maybe, with Max Verstappen, maybe if the Red Bull improves a bit, maybe we'll see him grab a race win in this triple header coming up. I think Max absolutely needs to keep himself close enough to the McLaren's ahead. But yeah, Oscar Piastri is in a very, very strong position and almost in the position where we can almost declare him as champion-elect for 2025. Brilliant drive yet again from Oscar. But yeah, let's go on to Red Bull Racing. And yeah, Max, even though I thought he should have got a penalty for what happened at turn 2 on the first lap, he did the absolute best he could this weekend. Obviously, we'll forget what happened in the sprint. What happened in the sprint happened. Wasn't his fault with the whole being released into the path of Antonelli. But, got pole position. had no right really to get pole position. That again, the Red Bull is not on the same level as the McLaren. It just isn't. But he delivered pole when it mattered, when the two McLaren drivers were very scruffy and the door was opened and he took the opportunity. But in the race, as was proven, even though he defended so valiantly and so hard, those McLarens could not be kept behind for the entire race. Absolutely no chance. Yeah. I kind of feel sorry for Max because the pace difference between McLaren and Red Bull was so big that even though Max was defending as hard as he was, it wasn't really making a difference in terms of slowing up the McLarens. They just kept coming into every overtaking zone, having a serious go, and Max constantly was having to damage his tyres by defending so hard and locking up and all of this. But again, eventually, McLaren, with both drivers, made their way through. So, yeah, he then dropped to third, then obviously was miles off the pace of the McLarens, and then got unlucky with the virtual safety car. George Russell started on the hard compound tyres, virtual safety car came out, Russell pitted and came out ahead on the mediums, just to add to Max's disappointing day. Max kept it close with Russell, but he could never get close enough to actually have a go at Russell for third place. If Max had come away with third place, I think he would have been not happy, but moderately satisfied, given that, you know, McLaren were just way too quick. But yeah, not getting on the podium is very disappointing for Max and his championship bid. But again, what can he do? Look at the pace of those McLarens. Max is the best driver on the grid, but he's not that good to where he can beat those McLarens. It's like, I mean, we saw it a couple times back in, it was about 30 years ago, or just over 30 years ago in 1993. Some of you older folk might remember this, but back in 93, the Williams car was the absolute best car, and then you had Ayrton Senna in a McLaren that was not terrible, but it wasn't anywhere near the Williams. But Senna, in the odd race, especially when it rained, Senna was somehow able to get pole or win races. But there were a lot of races that year where Senna just, you know, as great as he was, he could not hold back those Williamses because they were just so unbelievably quick compared to his McLaren at the time. That's what it reminds me at the minute with Max, where as much as Max, as great as Max is and as hard as he defends and does everything perfectly, it still isn't enough because the McLarens are just that much quicker. Red Bull have got to give him a better car. They've got to improve this car. Yes, Max has had 3 pole positions this season. It's all been down to him, not the Red Bull car. They have got to improve that car for him. And not just him, but Yuki Tsunoda. And a quick word on Tsunoda. Despite the, you know, speeding through the pit lane, which wasn't great, I thought Tsunoda did absolutely fine in the race. I don't think he could have done any better than P10 because that Red Bull car is really not that good. So for Tsunoda, I don't think he should be criticised at all. P10 was an absolutely fine result for him. That car just needs to get better because it is nowhere near good enough for Max Verstappen to win the championship. Absolutely nowhere near. So, yeah, we will see what Red Bull do there. But, you know, Max is an incredible driver. He's a generational driver. He's one of the best I've ever seen. But he cannot perform miracles like that. So, yeah, Red Bull have got to help him out. Next up we'll go on to is, I think, Mercedes-Benz, obviously considering they got the podium. George Russell, I think a bit lucky to get the podium because he consistently this weekend was slower than Antonelli. Didn't really have a great weekend up until the race and wasn't having a great race really on the hard compound tyres. And then when the virtual safety car came out, benefited from it, got onto the mediums and then was able to finish in third. Great result, I will say. You know, another podium for Russell. That is his, is it 4th podium in 6 races? That's very good. You know, great result for him, but it wasn't really deserved, I think. And I also don't really think they had the pace, really, to get on the podium. But circumstances played into their favour. So well done for, putting themselves in a position to benefit from it, I guess. But yeah, Russell, great result, but probably the first weekend where he's actually had trouble against his teammate, Kimi Antonelli. And talking of Antonelli, let's go on to him now. Very good speed all weekend. Obviously got pole for the sprint, was third in the actual qualifying for the actual Grand Prix. But I think you can really tell that he is 18 years old because he was very all over the place at times. Very jittery, maybe a bit erratic, you could say at times. Yeah, again, and I thought it when I was watching the race. You could really tell that he is 18 years old and that he is so much younger than his competitors. And yeah, I think that's what led to him, yet again, having not the greatest start in the Grand Prix, and also in some of the battles he had, locking up, going deep, like we saw with his battle with Alex Albon. Just a bit, I think you could say erratic from Antonelli. And I think this is, even though he was a bit unlucky with the virtual safety car, did cost him quite a few seconds. I don't think he would have finished any higher than where he did. I think this is probably the first Grand Prix you could be disappointed in Antonelli. I know in Bahrain he finished in 11th, but that was really because of a very poorly timed safety car that really hurt his race. I don't think you can really blame that for his result yesterday. So yeah, I think you have every right, if you are an Antonelli fan or a Mercedes fan, to be disappointed in his race yesterday. It could have been better. He could have been a bit more under control. And a top 5 is really what he should have been getting, and he did not get that. But we are seeing improvements from Antonelli. He's getting quicker. And you have to remember, I think this was Antonelli's first ever weekend in Miami. In terms of, he's never raced around this track before until this past weekend. I think that's the case. I'm not sure if F2 has been there last year. I don't think so. So, yeah, that's very impressive to be outpacing someone as good and experienced as George Russell around a track you've never raced at before. So, yeah, he's getting better, but needs to calm down a bit. But again, he's 18 years old. All of his competitors are like 6-7 years older than him and have been in Formula One a few years more than him. So we do need to factor that in. He's not going to be the finished article at 18 years old. He will get better as time goes on. No doubt about that. But yeah, for Mercedes, 3rd and 6th, good result, I would say. And now just need to hope that these upgrades coming at Imola do give them that extra step forward to maybe start winning some races and getting even better results as a team. Maybe some double podiums and stuff like that. Because Russell is still close enough to where he can turn the championship round in his favour. And is doing as best as he can, really, in that Mercedes. Next up, I think we'll go on to Ferrari. We will actually review Williams in this roundup because I do want to talk a bit about them because, they were right in there with those teams, so why not talk about them? But yeah, we'll go on to Ferrari because, just what an absolute shit show this team is. The only positive about the weekend is that they were on the podium on the sprint, but that was only because they managed to go to the dry tyres earlier than most others did. In qualifying, they were legitimately slower than Williams. Just awful, absolutely awful. If you remember a year ago, Ferrari were basically lapping the Williams. The difference was massive compared to this time last year. Nowhere near good enough from Ferrari in qualifying. And then in the race, they didn't really have any pace. I know it's not that easy to overtake, but if they had a load more pace, they would have shown it. And Williams were legitimately quicker than them. Ferrari, obviously, there was a lot of controversy with the whole swapping the drivers around. Lewis Hamilton getting frustrated on the fresh mediums that, they wouldn't tell Leclerc to let him through. And was even saying, what are you on, a tea break or something? I think it was something like that he said on the radio. And I was even thinking during the race, now you know what Sebastian Vettel had to put up with, but all those years ago. But yeah, obviously they should have made the decision earlier to let Lewis through, but in the end it didn't really make much of a difference. They then let Leclerc back through, and again, didn't make much of a difference. They were never going to finish ahead of Antonelli. They didn't have the pace. I mean, yeah, they were catching, but they didn't have enough pace to overtake him before the end. And we're lucky that Carlos Sainz got a bit screwed to an extent by the virtual safety car, because Sainz did have enough pace to beat those two Ferrari cars. But again, just got a bit unlucky with the timing of the virtual safety car, because Sainz pitted before the virtual safety car. Both Ferraris pitted during it and saved half a pit stop. So, yeah, Ferrari, not only were they awful and got an awful result, they were lucky to get the result they got. They really should have been 8th and 9th, never mind, 7th and 8th. But yeah, absolutely terrible. Absolutely awful. Another thing that was awful as well with that whole swapping positions was the reason, I think, what was it? The reason when they let Leclerc back through on Hamilton, or it was the other way around when Hamilton was behind Leclerc and Hamilton was wanting to get through. They had actually no. I'm remembering it wrong. It was when Hamilton was ahead of Leclerc and Leclerc was asking to be let back through. They told Leclerc that they'd be swapping positions, but they had not even asked Lewis yet. Again, awful communication. It reminds me of the first Grand Prix, where both race engineers for both drivers in Melbourne, have the same weather system, the same access to the same weather radar, and they're literally feet apart from each other. Leclerc's engineer says heavy rain's coming, and then Hamilton's engineer says, oh, I don't know, we'll see. How the fuck is that possible? You've got the same weather radar. That should not be happening. And again, awful communication, but it just compounded what was already a terrible Grand Prix and a terrible Grand Prix weekend. Even if Ferrari improve a bit at Imola with some upgrades, does it make a difference? No. They are so far behind now in the championship. If anyone out there still legit thinks Ferrari have a chance at the championship, then you are deluded. It's over. They may as well just focus on next year's car at this point. It is over for 2025. I didn't think it would be this disastrous 2025 for the Scuderia. I never thought they would win the championship. After testing, before testing, I thought they would have a good chance, but after testing, I didn't think it would happen for them. But I didn't think they would drop off this quickly like they have. So yeah, very disappointing. And yeah, I don't really see where Ferrari go from here. Again, even if they improve their car at the next race at Imola, who cares? You're not going to win the championship, so who cares? May as well, like I said, focus on next year's car and put enough time into that to where you're at least starting the next era of Formula One from a better position where you are at the moment with these cars that have only got a few more months until they're out of date, let's say. But yeah, awful from Ferrari. And that video I made, which some people thought was way too premature, that video I made at the end of March after the second race of the season saying Ferrari's championship chances were basically over. Surprise, surprise, not to suck my own dick, but I was proven correct. So, yeah. I just knew after those first couple races that this was not Ferrari's year. So, yeah. But yeah, finally, we will go on to Williams. We're not going to go just straight to the end. We're going to go to Williams because, yeah, they deserve to be talked about absolutely in this review. They were super quick all weekend, and they were legitimately quicker than Ferrari this weekend. So congratulations on that, being that quick and being the fourth best team in the Grand Prix itself. And in qualifying just about as well. Alex Albon, what a race he had. He was so damn good in that race. And like I said earlier, I think that was probably the best race of his career, given the car he was in. To finish 5th in the 4th best car is an incredible result. It really is. Yes, I know he's had a couple podiums for Red Bull, but those podiums were expected in that car. To finish in the top 5 in a Williams that is, closer to the midfield than it is to the front, that is an absolutely brilliant drive from Albon. And he has been so good this season. He has been, without doubt for me, one of the best drivers on the grid this season. I would probably put him in my top 6, maybe top 7, say for the best drivers so far in 2025. He really has impressed me. One thing I will add though, even though Albon, great race, really happy for the guy, and really proving just how much he has improved since he was at Red Bull a few years ago. Carlos Sainz still isn't quite there yet, let's say, in that Williams. Qualifying was great. 3rd row of the grid, out-qualified both Ferraris, which I'm sure was great for him, given that he was kicked out of Ferrari for Lewis Hamilton, when I think Ferrari would probably want to swap back, because Hamilton has been pretty poor so far. Sainz, great in qualifying. And after the last Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, really, it was feeling like Sainz was getting on top of things. But in the race, I mean, for one, he never really had the pace of his teammate, which was disappointing. And Albon actually overtook Sainz on track. And I know the virtual safety car period screwed him a bit, but his pace was a bit disappointing given how far ahead Albon was of the Ferraris. It was like 10 seconds or so in the end. He finished ahead of the Ferraris. Carlos should have beat at least one of those Ferrari cars. So I am disappointed in what Carlos did in the race. And really, for Carlos, even though Albon had a great race, he really did. If you're Carlos Sainz, you've got to be finishing, ahead of Albon. That's what we expect of you. And a 5th and 6th for Williams was absolutely possible yesterday, but Carlos Sainz did not fulfill his end of the bargain. But he is getting closer to that. He is getting closer to figuring it out in that Williams. But yesterday was disappointing. Even though, 12 points for Williams is a great result, there were a few more points on offer, no doubt, in that Grand Prix. But guys, that is it for this podcast reviewing the Miami Grand Prix. Thank you guys for coming along for this episode, and thank you for coming along to the watch along. The only watch along I did in the Miami Grand Prix weekend for qualifying was a good stream, even though I was absolutely knackered. You could tell I was absolutely cooked in that during that stream, because I'd been awake for so long and been doing so much stuff, and had a bit of sunburn as well, which I later found out the day after. But yeah, thank you for coming on for this podcast. There will be a recorded video coming out in between this podcast and the next Grand Prix at Imola, a video focusing on Oscar Piastri. So yeah, that will come out probably in the probably this time next week, say 4 or 5 days before the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. So yeah, make sure to check that out when that video comes out. I'm not sure exactly what the subject of the video is going to be, but it will be a video on Oscar Piastri. So again, make sure to check that out. And then we will come to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix Imola, the first European race of the season. And I can announce that I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch-along for that weekend. So don't worry, both watch-alongs will be returning. And my co-commentator, Niblo, will be joining me for the race watch-along as well. And then, of course, the day after that Grand Prix, there'll be a podcast reviewing that Grand Prix. And, of course, Imola is the start of a triple header. So there is plenty of content coming your way for the rest of this month. So yeah, make sure to check out all that content once it comes. But guys, thanks for coming along for this podcast, and until next time, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.